Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back. It's been a minute since I did a video. I shouldn't say that, it's been a couple weeks, but I didn't want to fade into obscurity again, so I figured I may as well pump something out. And I had a couple deck profiles that I was juggling around, and more on topic was I had a Mordred one, and for some reason I just didn't have a lot of passion or a lot of love for the deck. I played it. It is what it was. What it was. I have been super into Shadow Paladin lately. It's been my big project since I had to put Mega Colony down just for a little bit, just so I didn't get too tired of it. And I've always had a home away from home deck during every incarnation of like the meta, and this has been mine for a while now. I love Shadow Paladins, and I also adore Phantom Blaster Dragon just as the extension. He's been my favorite card for a long time. And I guess that's why Mordred didn't really click for me, was even though he's like an incarnation of Phantom Blaster, if you've read the lore, the deck itself just didn't do it for me. So I figured the world didn't need one more Mordred deck, and instead wanted to share this because this is actually the start of a bigger project that I started working on with somebody else in my play group that I met recently. We're both big PBD fans, and we kind of started sharing these ideas we had, and it kind of just culminated into this little masterpiece that I've been so in love with lately. So I'm really excited to share that. However, before I do that, while I wait for more things to come in the mail, I wanted to share this because this is also a very interesting build, and this is kind of where my train of thought started with this whole project. And this is a Gust Blaster variant that aims to choke out your opponent on damage and just have a very heavy stranglehold on your opponent's resources, both their damage and their field and just the whole 9 yards. So it has a very interesting and very, very fun playstyle that I really enjoy. However, it is a bit greedy, and that's the one thing I want to talk about straight away, is that this deck is super, super greedy with its resources, which is where my inspiration to start into a new project came from. So I will reference that new project here and there, but I want to keep on track that this is its own thing and has branched off into something else. But let's get started. So, you got your starter. I don't even know where to go with that. Your starting grade 3 is going to be your 4 Phantom Blaster Dragon. So Phantom Blaster is actually a very solid card. I think a lot of people overlook it. Right now, especially just because things like force decks are going to be more prevalent, you want to keep very tight stranglehold on your opponent's resources, and this is where this guy comes in. So again, you do want to choke your opponent on damage, and that is where your main aim is, but if you are unable to do that for whatever reason, and a lot of matchups just do not care, Messiah is not going to give a shit if you are choking out their damage. Mordred generally won't really care about it. Vanquisher kind of cares about it, but they can still float with like 1 or 2. So this is where this guy comes in. I don't want to hype him up too much in this video, but I will, just because, again, he is the main focus of the next project that I'm working on. But he is, in a very TLDR way, just a very solid way of controlling your opponent's resources, while getting rid of yours and using your resources that you can replenish pretty easily. So, counter must 1, wipe out 3 of your rear guards, your opponent retires 3 of theirs, he gains 15k in a crit. Interesting, very solid base, very, big chunky boy attack. And if your opponent has no rear guards, you can Soul Blast a grade 3 to deal your opponent 1 damage. We don't use this very often, but it does come up. I think the biggest example that I can find right off the top of my head is Malketh with Angel Feathers. They heal quite a bit. They can actually pretty much trade off damage pretty well. This is how you get a bit of a jump on them and kind of force them back into a corner that you want them to be in. So resource management, aggression, just a really good solid boy to use against decks that don't care if you choke them on damage. I love this card. I cannot express that enough. This is probably the closest thing, next to, Darkface, obviously, who we're probably never going to see again. Rip, my boy. Closest thing I ever called like an avatar card in my life. I built this deck years ago whenever he first came out, and I was so bad with it, but I loved it so much, and it was the very first moment in Vanguard that I ever wanted to just crunch and learn and build and research and everything. And for my ADHD self, especially as a teenager, that was a very difficult thing for me to do. So I love this guy. He's just amazing. I love him. So next up, we got your 4 Gust Blaster Dragon. So Gust Blaster is a bit of an interesting card, and it really just stems from the fact that he gains crits so damn hard. His most important ability is if you have a grade 3 in the soul with Blaster in its card name, when one of your rear guards is retired, he gains a crit, which means this dude can push 5, 6 crits, if not more. Obviously more is a little more redundant, but generally 3, 4, 5, 6 crits very easily. He just becomes massive. His other ability is when he attacks, retire 2 rear guards, he gains 10k, draw a card, and your opponent retires a unit. So just a bit of everything, and obviously because of that, when his ability goes off, he gains 2 additional crits, so he's swinging for 3 crits on average, as long as you have those 2 conditions, or that but 1 condition met, really. And that is where the magic of this deck tries to pull itself off. You can have your opponent sit at about 2 damage. That I say 2 damage because that is usually the point you have your opponent at, without trading off like, oh, I can't attack from like my rear guards, and I can't, obviously like you don't want to hold off on like your Vanguard attacking is what I was trying to say there. So obviously without crits being involved, you usually have your opponent comfortably at about 2 damage. That's also why we actually try to aim to ride the 5Ks in this deck, because if you attack, they, obviously are going to say no guard on that. You check, as long as you don't get a crit, which you can pass off a crit to another rear guard in the back. Typically, I will do that. I'll call like Nem into the back. So if I check a crit, I can give it all to the rear guard. That way they don't have any damage at all. And that is a lot of hoops to jump through. And that's probably why this project didn't stay to be like my full-time one until like, Blaster Overlord comes out. But I'm going to keep this guy actually set back here because I'm going to reference him quite a bit. But he's amazing, and if you do hit a matchup where they are reliant on Counterblast really in any way, shape, or form, that is where this deck begins to shine, because you can choke your opponent so hard. And again, if you are not, this is the angle you go at, and we'll talk a bit more about that as we progress through the deck. But again, I'm going to keep referencing this guy. I'm going to keep him up here. So for the grade 2s, we run, actually only 8 grade 2s. We're running 4 Cursed Lancer. With the way I wanted to build this. Now, the Maka Karen combo is really solid, but for this particular build, I didn't want to go with it just because I have a different direction that I was navigating through. So, as far as grade 2s went, there weren't a ton that actually had a ton of synergy with the way this deck wanted to work. So, what this guy is you have to call him to a circle with a rear guard in it. Immediately, they'll just kick off one of his crits, putting him to 2. When you call him, Soul Blast 1, he gains 10k. If you have no face-up damage, you're in damage zone, countercharge 1. This guy is pretty much just here for countercharging, and that's about it. It becomes 20k, but again, we aren't attacking with rear guards. This deck is very, very, very insistent on just eating those rear guards and not really doing too much else with it. So that is where this guy comes in handy. Because of that, you can actually use these guys to attack your opponent's rear guards, try to nail them out. If they don't, it's fine. But as you're attacking your opponent's rear guards, then you can swing with this, retire the cards you just attacked with, cause your opponent to retire an additional rear guard, and at that point, it's all said and done, you've wiped out your opponent's rear guards, and you're attacking with like 3, 4 crits extra. That's going to vary depending on your plays, but and that's the whole point of everything from grade 2 down, is fodder and then kind of juicing out whatever you can. In this case, what we're juicing out of him is just a counter charge. Additionally, we have one card I completely forgot existed, honestly, was for Darkbond Trumpeter. Counterblast 1, call a 5k unit. Is it a 5k unit or is it a 5k grade 1? I gotta... Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, 5k powered unit. Call to rear guard at rest. Every time you do so, every time you call a card with 5k power or lower, or 5k power, excuse me, this card gains 3k. It beefs itself up a little bit. We aren't looking for the beef, though. The beef doesn't matter in terms of rear guards. Again, this is just something that is interchangeable between the 2 Vanguards that you do have. So when you are using Phantom Blaster and you do want to be more aggressive, this card is still just as useful. But really, all we want to do is make sure that we are pulling as much stuff from our decks and that we're thinning as much as possible. We're getting those triggers nice and primed up. We're grabbing our combo pieces as fast as possible. And we're just making sure that we have enough fodder that when our big boys start to eat stuff, that we can continuously do that and make sure that we are doing it to supplement our costs and doing it efficiently and making sure that we just aren't ruining our hand in the process and staying nice and defensive. And that's it for the grade 2s. Again, there are other grade 2s you can use. Again, I was pretty much turned on to the Maka combo with Karen once this new project started, but for this build, I just didn't feel like it was as fantastic. It's fine, but the things that we want to run in this deck, and specifically the grade 1 lineup, just didn't leave a lot of room for it. So again, for Gust Blaster in general, that's where I decided to go. For grade 1s, we have, it's really just the basics. These decks build themselves to a decent extent. So we got the 4 Sword Breakers. Again, I mean, the counterblast when you draw a card, this card's just amazing. Replenishes resources. It really dampens the effect that your costs have on you. So, obviously pretty amazing. Partner in Crime, I got the Vornemin. I don't even know where to go to embellish how good this card is. It's just, obviously, you know, rest it, call a 5k unit from the deck. It's just very solid. And then we obviously have the 4 Branwyn, because we want to search for our cards and thin as much as possible. So that's the basic package. That's like the basic Shadow Paladin package with most decks at this point. But we have, you know, let's talk about this first. So we got the 1 Dead Armor Dragon. Dead Armor is probably one of the best combo pieces you're going to have in this deck, and it's almost entirely because of how this card works. Now, had I gone harder with the grade 1 lineup, I actually wanted to find room for 2 Pain Painter, or Nightmare Painter, excuse me. Pain Painter is Yu-Gi-Oh! Just to get the soul charging off a bit better. But as I came to realize, in this build anyway, this card we don't get off too often. Our counterblasts are used, but out of the 5 we're going to get, they're pretty touch and go. Breaker's going to be your biggest thing, and Breaker, I find myself using quite a bit, but really not to a point where I have to get any more than this off like once. And so because of that, you know, the 1 Dead Armor is not going to choke that resource too badly. However, let's talk about what he does. So Dead Armor is when your Vanguard attacks, or when your unit, I think it's just when your unit attacks actually. Yeah, when your unit attacks, so it can actually be anything, but obviously we're using for the Vanguard. When your unit attacks, Soul Blast 1, retire this unit. Your opponent for that attack has to go drop 2 or more to attack with it. So this behind your Gust Blaster is fantastic. Now, to paint a picture, what happens here is you swing. Gust Blaster is going to be going for, with his ability, I mean 33k plus. You retire this. This goes up by 1 crit. Use his ability, you retire 2 rear guards. Draw, gains another 10k. That'll put him at a 33k. No, I'm sorry, that'll actually put him at 43k, because you have to write, you know, this is your second grade 3 ride, so that's 43k. Has to guard drop 2 or more, and he gains an additional 2 crits, so that'll put him at 4 crits. So with this combo, you are doing 4 crits, 40k plus, and they have to drop 2 or more, which is going to heavily tax their hand, even with, you know, 30k Sentinel shields. You know, I mean, it's still 2 drops, so it's still the better, you know, scenario. But either way, you're still putting your opponent into this really difficult position where they are backed into a corner, and they do have to drop more out of their hand. And that brings me to the reason why we only have 1 of these in the deck, and that is because it is extremely easy to search. I don't think any more than 1 is at all necessary. You can take out 1 of these and put in... I mean, you can't take out like a breaker or something and put in 1 of these, but I didn't feel like that was at all necessary. You can grab it right away with Nemin. I mean, you have so much searching power with this deck that I don't feel like it is at all needed to be ran at any more than 1. You run the risk of maybe damage checking it during your first damage, but that's about it, and it's such a small chance that I don't ever have that problem pop up. So, that is my take on this. The only thing you do have to watch out for is, again, the Soul Blast. Between him and Cursed Lancer, they're the only 2 things that are going to be soul blasting, and this guy's going to be using up the most of it. Cursed Lancer, I only really use once per game, if even that, in his full effect. Really, again, he's just a ride target, and he's just one of the few grade 2s that I found to be bearing a lot of synergy with this particular kind of build. And again, this is a very one-shot musket kind of build. This is very, very, like, it's, I don't want to say it's glass cannon, but it's like, I don't know, wood cannon. What's slightly stronger than glass, but still not very strong. It's still not very sturdy. Like wood, maybe? It's wood cannon. I confirm that's what we're calling it. So because of that, you know, we're here for a good time, not a long time. So my pressure on resources isn't too bad, and plus you're gonna be trying to rewrite every turn, so you are supplementing it just fine. However, if you do have problems with it, feel free to take out one Cool Bow and one either Breaker or Branwyn, either one's fine, for 2 Nightmare Painter. I didn't get them in the mail in time, so I never really incorporated it into my physical build, but that's fine. I do run it in a few incarnations of the build, which is a card that'll let you soul charge, obviously. So that's perfectly fine if you want to do that, if you want to try to go this route with the build, but it hasn't been too bad for me. I haven't had too much trouble. And then I just mentioned him, but our last grade 1 is our 4 Cool Bow, which is... Oh, I just dropped my trigger lineup. So it's another card I really enjoy, and obviously I do. I wouldn't be running it if I didn't. So what this guy does is you rest him and a unit in the same column at any power 5k unit from that normal unit, excuse me, from the drop zone to your hand. So this replenishes this every turn if you need it. This can replenish your Nemons if they get retired. This can replenish your Breakers if they get retired, or if you use them with their abilities. Cool Bow is a fantastic card and a fantastic addition to this deck. I think that if Phantom Blaster Overlord has a pretty decent cost, like a pretty hefty cost, this guy might actually see play if they don't start to really supplement the heavier retiring abilities with like other rear guards in this future set, which I think they probably will. I have a very hard time believing that they wouldn't, but if they don't, I could see this guy getting a ton of play just because of how good he is. And again, it's practically for free. Now, when we're playing against like retired decks, something in your front row is going to be getting killed. He gets sniped pretty easily by Kagero, things like that. But Vanquisher being a big target like that, I mean, you can literally, like, actually, you know, in the subject of Vanquisher, if you have this, and we'll just say like this in the column, right? You rest these 2, you keep him in the back, you rest these 2, get this guy back. You can... Actually, you can do one of 2 things. You can either just retire this front row rear guard with Gust Blaster, or, I mean, if something else is going on in your field, you just call over it. You're fine. You're literally exactly where you were to begin with, and you get additional crit. But this deck is actually very decent against Vanquisher, surprisingly enough, and it's because of things like Gust Blaster and the way Gust Blaster works, where you can just wipe out your front row and prohibit them from using that as a source to get off like their Vanquisher abilities. But yeah, this guy's great. I did originally run 2 Paladin, and that's the card where it's kind of must 1, retire 2, bring back a card with a grade that's less than the combined grades, and then they both get 10k. I liked him a lot. I just felt like he minus the resources more than I was comfortable with, so I added a 4th one of these and like a 4th Breaker, I think. But again, if you would prefer to run Nightmare Painter, which I do recommend, it just never made its way into my physical build, one of these and a Branwyn is fine. Breaker I like to keep in the deck just because it's pretty decent. You want to keep drawing, you want to keep those resources coming to you. And to wrap it up, we've got, of course, the trigger lineup, which is 7 draw triggers. So crits in this deck are really, truly, and honestly just there for the shield value. So that's why we only run 5 of them. No, crits are handy. I have definitely, you know, pushed a bit further in a game. I've had 2 games I can think of where they were at 1. I swung for 4. They did a no pass. They did like a 1 to pass, and then basically chancing that crit, and then that wound up being like the push. However, again, crits in this deck, just because of the way the deck runs and because of how resource heavy this deck is, I just kind of find myself really praying for draws more than anything else. Obviously we have the 4 heals, but that's just par for the course. I also run the extra Howl Owl just because you, especially late game, can definitely find yourself targeting them with Nemons if you really need to. Now, we are hitting Breaker pretty hard in this deck. Originally I ran it at 3. My first one actually had it at 2, and then I put it at 3 just because it filled out a little bit. But because of that, very late game, you can run out of those targets. So I do find myself just running, you know, pulling out one very, very late game, and that's like the last turn level of like late game. But really try it out yourself. 6/6 is also very fine. It's not going to hurt you really any. I think the other one is just there in case you need to pull it out with Nemen's skill, but this has been working really well for me. However, I can't say this enough. There's a new project coming out with this deck, you know, Phantom Blaster Overlord project, that I really cannot wait to do a deck profile on. So this is just kind of like a precursor to that. So if you're a big fan of Gust Blaster, try this out. I think it's a very solid build. It's very, very glass cannon. Again, this deck is simply just meant to choke out your opponent's resources, and if it cannot do that for whatever reason, sit on Phantom Blaster Dragon and kind of just peg them with a lot of field nuking and just kind of overusing your expendable resources. And most decks are gonna have a lot of trouble dealing with this, but I think this new project has kind of caught my eye a bit more than old Gusty boy here, so we'll see how that works. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoy the deck profile. If you have any questions at all, please let me know. I'm always happy to answer them. I'm usually pretty quick with answering comments on my videos, so until next time, folks. I don't know what I'll be doing next. I kind of want to do a discussion video on the Cradle Markers and Gridora and just do a little bit of speculation and talk a bit about that. But we will see. I have a few more deck profiles. I say a few. I have like three more. Not including the new project that I want to do, and then I've just been looking into a couple other things. I also have a series that I want to start coming out with called Budget Bug, while I have you guys here, if you have watched this far. Budget Bug is going to be a little small edition series where I'm going to talk about doing deck profiles of highly budgeted clans that budgeted versions of clans for people that are getting into the game and have a very, 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 again, limited budget. And we're talking like doing the absolute bare minimum, but working with it the best we possibly can. And I'm really looking forward to that. I just have to kind of get the motivation around to start it up again and building and testing and everything. Right now, all my attention has just kind of been on this and a few other things I've been doing in my spare time that aren't Vanguard related. But until next time, folks, I will see you again. Please stay safe. I know I've said this a couple times, but again, I live in America, and we're spiking again. We're spiking, and it stresses me out. I work at a hospital, and I work in an ER almost all day, and every day I just see people, COVID after COVID after COVID after COVID, and people aren't wearing masks, and it's just really stressing me out. So please be safe. Please wear your masks. Please, for the love of God, stay indoors and just try to stay healthy. If you gotta work, I'm sorry. It sucks, but please, we're gonna get through this eventually. Or die trying, who knows? Everything is falling apart and I can't stop it. I'm so sorry. Have a great one.